I'm Leslie, and the tiny domestic war I'm currently in is over about 8 feet of concrete and a strict sense of parking etiquette. I live in a 5-level underground parking building attached to my apartment complex. Every apartment gets an end-to-end double bay. 2 cars, one behind the other, and the only way in or out is a locked automatic roller door. You either have the remote or you tailgate someone who does. I only own 1 car, so I usually park at the back of my bay. It's considerate, leaves the front spot for neighbors who actually own 2 cars, and if my friends are coming over, they can park in front of mine if they let me know. Earlier this year, some random car started showing up in front of mine on Friday afternoons. At first, it was a shrug. I live close to the city, late trains are a thing. It's annoying, but survivable. Then it became a pattern. For about 5 weeks, it was there every Friday like clockwork. If I'd planned to leave the front spot free for a friend, the car would still be there by evening. Sometimes I moved my car to the front just to get around it. Other times I left the space open because I'd told friends they could use it. Always. The same car, same careless presence blocking me. I'm not a confrontational person by default, but I also don't enjoy standing in the dark of a loading pillar, phone in hand, arranging a cab because someone treated our little shared space like a suggestion box. I started with polite notes. Please don't park here. This is my bay. Those got ignored. Politeness turned into bluntness. The notes went from please to you're blocking my car, and then to a printed A4 with the license plate clearly visible and a lukewarm threat. Move this vehicle or I'll press charges, have it towed. I didn't want drama, but I also didn't want to be perpetually late or miss plans because someone assumed the garage was a free-for-all. My husband, Ethan, heard me grumble in the kitchen more than once. He listened, rolled his eyes in the exact sympathetic but mildly amused way he does, and said nothing that would make me feel foolish for being annoyed. He's the kind of person who notices patterns. Where I see inconvenience, he sees repeatable behavior. So when I taped the last aggressive note under a windshield wiper on a Friday afternoon, I felt like I'd exhausted the reasonable options. The stakes felt small and enormous all at once. A ruined Friday night, a postponed trip, and the feeling that a stranger's laziness could rearrange my life for the evening. That Friday night, my friends left without me. I imagined explanations. Someone out late, car forgotten, drinks and apologies, and a pickup at 2 a.m. But the next morning, the aggressive note was still limp beneath the wipers, exactly where I'd left it. At that point, polite escalation and passive hope had both been checked off. I was out of options that didn't involve making a scene or losing an hour of my weekend. And that's when the situation stopped being purely inconvenient and started feeling like an injustice. Saturday afternoon, the car was still there, like an offering to the gods of laziness. I'd been ready to leave with my friends for a long weekend. We'd sorted cars, playlists, snacks. Instead, I was making increasingly uncreative phone calls to building management who were sympathetic but useless. Their first suggestion was towing, so I called the towing company they use and got the kind of flat, embarrassed excuse that should have been a full refund for my dignity. The truck can't get up to level 3. The ramps, the clearances, whatever jargon they used, there was no way to swing a tow arm into our tight, low-ceilinged garage. No truck, no tow. For a hot, angry minute, I pictured myself sitting on that car's hood like some suburban protester, arms crossed, refusing to move until someone came back to fetch it. I imagined sending my friends away without me, dramatically waving goodbye while I staged a one-woman sit-in. I also pictured how silly I'd look in the morning papers if anyone cared about my parking bay drama. Practicality won out over melodrama, mostly because the weekend plans involved a ferry and one car was supposed to hold half our stuff. Ethan, my husband, watched me cycle through options with the calm of someone who knows me well enough to tell when I've hit the do something ridiculous threshold. He didn't laugh, which would have stung. Instead, he said, "Okay, let's fix this." That sentence was the exact moral support I needed. It wasn't bravado. It was logistics. He thought of the Jacks. My parents live 30 minutes away and have a narrow, almost apologetic garage where I tinker on a project car that's on the last legs of a minor restoration. Part of that restoration's brilliance is the set of vehicle positioning jacks my dad swears by. Little hydraulic dollies that slip under each wheel, lift the car a touch, and let you wheel it with astonishing stealth and precision. If you've never seen one, imagine a skate for each wheel that also has a tiny hydraulic lifter. They let you nudge a car sideways like a very deliberate bumper car. Ethan called my dad, explained the situation with surgical brevity. No oversharing, just facts. And within an hour, he was back with a battered toolbox and a sly grin. I am dividing blame between my husband and the cosmos for how quickly this escalated from annoyance to action. He gathered the jacks, texted a couple of our friends who live nearby. They were delighted at the idea of turning petty revenge into a short, sweaty project, and we reconvened in the garage like an unconvincing civic militia. Ethan took the lead. He's the sort of person who reads instructions for fun, which is useful when you're about to mobilize a hatchback by hand. He walked the 6 of us through the plan like a conductor. Slot jacks under the wheels, pump to lift, rotate slightly to free the wheels, then gently roll. There was nothing cinematic about it. No crowbar, no dramatic monologue. Just 6 people doing careful physical math in low light while a fluorescent bulb hummed an angry tone above. Moving that car required coordination and patience. It wasn't that heavy, but it was wedged in, and in a space where even the smallest scrape would have ruined someone's day or bank account. Ethan positioned himself at the front, guiding the nose where we wanted it to go. One friend steadied the rear. 2 of us eased the passenger side a hair. The others nudged the driver's side. We moved like a slow, determined amoeba until we had it behind a structural pillar in a shadowed recess, an area not intended for parking, the kind of spot that exists solely to collect dust and bad decisions. We tucked the nose toward the wall so there was maybe a foot of room on either side. It was perfectly inconvenient. You could get the car in there without impeding load bearing, but getting it out again would be a small, annoying puzzle. I pulled my aggressive note back off the wiper for the last time, feeling oddly triumphant and a little ridiculous all at once. Ethan shoved the jacks back into the trunk with the casual finality of someone who'd closed a book on a minor chapter of chaos. We left for the weekend with our plans intact and a story to tell. My friends made a point of high-fiving Ethan, who accepted it like a man who'd performed community service by proxy. I alternated between gratitude and amusement, grateful that he'd taken the lead, amused by how something as petty as a parking spat could feel like an orchestral production when you had the right people and the right tools. It wasn't violent, it wasn't illegal as far as I could tell, and it felt weirdly clean. The car was out of the way, but not gone. Just in a place where whoever owned it would have to do work to retrieve it. That little bit of effort was precisely the point. We'd taken away their laziness as a free option and swapped it for a small logistical cost. I slept that night feeling less like a victim of apathy and more like someone who had reclaimed her Friday nights, with a lot of help from a husband who knows his way around a hydraulic jack. Monday afternoon, I swung back into the building, expecting either a miracle. The mysterious owner had returned with profuse apologies and six-pack, or at least the sight of an empty bay. Instead, I was greeted by the same dull hatchback, tucked into its little cave between pillar and wall like a feral cat who'd learned to hide from trouble. Up close, it was obvious someone had fought with it. The front wheels were turned at odd angles, as if someone had wrestled at the steering wheel for a while and then given up. There were faint scuff marks on the pillar and a smear of dust where their bumper had kissed concrete in defeat. I ran my fingers over the aggressive note I'd taken back. The ink was smudged, as if a gloved hand had gripped it in irritation. And for a second, I pictured the owner standing there, phone in hand, trying to figure out whether to call the tow company or their mate who keeps tools for everything in his ute. I felt a small, clean satisfaction that's hard to confess aloud. It wasn't triumph, so much as equilibrium restored. Someone's casual inconsideration had been turned into someone's inconvenient puzzle. Ethan watched me study the scene with the same stillness he'd used while orchestrating the move. He didn't gloat. He simply handed me my keys and said, "You good?" I was. The car stayed where we'd left it, But it didn't matter. The point had been made. Word spread on the level like a slow clap. A few neighbors popped their heads out of stairwells with smiles that were part curiosity, part complicity. The guy who sometimes parks his motorbike in that shadowed patch, I'd only ever seen him in a fluorescent hoodie, pretended not to notice, which was fine. The building manager finally came down, managerly, apologetic, and muttered something about unregistered parking, and we'll look into it. But the tone was performative. The real resolution had already happened. By midweek, the car was gone, removed with some kind of quiet, embarrassed efficiency I never witnessed. Maybe they called a friend with a van and a plan. Maybe they pushed it out at 3 a.m. with the help of a contraption I don't want to fully imagine. I never saw that car again. I like to think the owner had to explain to someone, a landlord, a partner, a very annoyed coworker, why their Friday night convenience had turned into a multi-day headache. That felt like a small, decent justice. There was also a softer aftertaste. Moving that car had been satisfying, but it was also a line we'd chosen to cross. Ethan and I talked about it that night in that practical, slightly sheepish way couples do after something petty turns tactical. We acknowledged that we'd escalated a parking spat into a scheme. We also agreed the alternative was letting someone else's laziness rearrange our lives. We didn't celebrate like conquerors. We shrugged, ate pizza, and watched a dumb sitcom. That's the real moral. You get your dignity back, and then you go on with your life. In the weeks after, people stopped leaving random cars in front of bays on our level. Maybe the story made the rounds. Maybe karma did its usual slow work. Maybe the owner learned a lesson the expensive way. Either way, I reclaimed my Friday nights and a small pocket of agency. Ethan kept the jacks in the trunk for a while longer, as if the universe might require a repeat performance. I made him promise not to get into the habit of tactical parking interventions, a promise that lasted long enough to be meaningful. Mostly, though, the episode shrank into the fabric of married life, an anecdote told at gatherings, the kind where you laugh at your own ridiculousness and then move on. The revenge was simple, proportionate, and oddly civilized. We turned passive selfishness into a logistical problem, and once the person who caused it had to solve that problem, everyone quietly went back to their routines. That small victory didn't change the world. It changed our weekend. It changed how I felt walking to my car on a Friday. And sometimes, in the dry logic of suburban small wars, that's enough. A few days later, the hatchback vanished like it had never existed. No ceremony, no confrontation, just a silent absence where irritation used to live. The space looked impossibly clean after all that drama, as if the concrete itself was relieved to be free of human nonsense. I stood there longer than I should have, car keys dangling in my hand, thinking about how absurd the whole saga had been. 5 weeks of polite notes, ruined Fridays, and minor fury, all undone by one night of stubborn teamwork and a borrowed set of jacks. It was ridiculous and perfect, the kind of story that sounds made up until you've lived through the small, grinding inconveniences that make ordinary people do mildly extraordinary things. Ethan called it creative problem solving. My dad called it questionably legal. I called it closure. The real satisfaction wasn't the hiding of the car. It was the balance it restored. Someone had treated my life like background noise, like my time was the cost of their convenience. They learned otherwise, not through shouting or escalation, but through physics and patience. After that, I noticed something subtle shift in me. I stopped apologizing for being annoyed when people were careless. I stopped thinking that politeness meant tolerating thoughtlessness. And Ethan, who'd wordlessly turned my frustration into action, became my quiet co-conspirator in reclaiming peace. The kind of person who doesn't make a big speech about right and wrong, just finds the most effective way to make the world a little fairer. The building's parking lot stayed calm after that. No more freeloaders, no mystery cars, just everyone minding their own space. Literally. Sometimes when I pull in on a Friday, I still picture that hatchback wedged behind the pillar, headlights staring blankly into the wall. Trapped by its own audacity. Poetic justice doesn't need applause. It just needs a clean parking bay and the quiet hum of the roller door closing behind you.